Week 10 of the NFL season is upon us. The season is flying by. We are here on the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast talking DFS. 10-game slate. We will get all the games to you, all coming up next. Happy football season Friday morning to everybody. Welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm Scott Jenstad, joined as always on Friday mornings by Ryan Belongia. If you could please rate or review the podcast, we always do appreciate that. Helps people find us, helps us out a lot. So if you have some nice things to say, you want to leave a bunch of stars, that would be always very much appreciated. Ryan, we're in week 10. This it was weird. I felt like the season kind of started a little bit slow, and now it is really flying by. How is everything in your world?
Yeah, everything's good. I know. It feels like the season just started, and now, we're more than halfway done. I guess it always seems to go like that.
It does.
I can't remember. I was trying to remember last week.
I can remind you. I took the wrong rookie quarterback. Was the moral of the story last weekend?
Yeah, unfortunately, I didn't have any CJ Stroud. He won everything. I mean, a crazy game, right?
It was. He had 160 yards and one touchdown in the first half, too. I was like, oh, he's doing all right. Might get some bunch of yards. And then, look the heck out.
Finished with 470 and 5. I think it was the first time ever that 3 pass catchers from the same team scored over 30 fantasy points,
Wow.
Which is crazy, right?
And by the way, none of them were Nico Collins.
None of them were Nico Collins, and I believe he caught the first touchdown.
What a crazy game. That was a wild game. But yeah, I liked that the Panthers Colts game. It just got weird. Like the 2 pick sixes was really bad. Like every time you're like, oh, here comes Carolina, they're going to do something. They kind of hit a wall. They threw a pick six, and it was just it was one of those start and stop games. Never really got flowing the way we needed it to. But it was disappointing. We had it had 40 points, but when you have 2 defensive touchdowns, that just messes everything up.
I gotta say, looking back, I was pretty disappointed in myself for not being on the Texans-Bucks game a little bit more, just because, we were really looking for spots. And in that one specifically, they got Dameon Pierce out. So really it's all going to be on Stroud no matter what.
Yep.
The Bucks, they get Vita Vea back. They're just as much of a pass funnel as, the Titans are that we always talk about. So I don't know. It did just all kind of line up. Also because there really wasn't that many other good spots. I mean, I chose Mac Jones in my highest dollar entry fee stuff. So, it's just because I didn't really like the position and I was trying to target the Washington defense. But yeah, I don't know. It was one of those spots that looking back, it was there. And I guess I just feel like I missed it. But
yeah, it was a tough week where you really had to get that one game. Like that was
right.
It just took off so.
And I was close. I played Dalton Schultz on my main lineup. So I did do pretty good in tournaments. I mean, I made a small profit. But yeah, I didn't really have anything else from that game. CeeDee Lamb helped too. But yeah, anyways, it was a good week in soccer and ready to get back to NFL.
Yeah, so let's jump into this slate. Another week where we have fewer games than you have on a full slate. We have 10 games, 6 early, 4 late. We do have a couple of interesting games, but the problem this week is you've got big offensive teams on bye. You have the Chiefs, the Dolphins, and the Eagles on the same week of bye. I know people in season-long leagues are struggling to find receivers. You got so many good guys out, and then also the Rams are out too. So you take the Rams offense is nothing to write home, but still got Cooper Kupp in there. The primetime games, last night game, Panthers-Bears was a horrendous football game, so I'm glad we didn't have that on the slate to talk about. Anyway, Colts-Pats is in Europe. Jets-Raiders on Sunday night. Broncos-Bills on Monday night. This is got to be the worst set of primetime games, at least on paper, that we've had maybe ever. It's like aside from the Bills, other teams, it's a rough primetime slate.
It's been depressing to watch, right?
Last night's game was horrible.
It was horrible.
Yeah.
I
can watch almost any NFL game and find some interesting stuff. And like Bears Panthers, it was just bad.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even want to think about it.
Yeah, let's not then. Let's jump into this slate. We've got a little bit more disparity in the over-unders. Not quite last week where everything was under 40. It was hard to find games. We do have 3 games that are over 45 on the Vegas projected total. We got Lions-Chargers, fun game at 48.5. Texans Bengals at 46.5. The CJ Stroud bump there has made Texans a team that has a little bit higher number. And Niners Jaguars, a very interesting game. Two teams coming off a bye, going in different directions. The Niners lost 3 in a row. The Jaguars have won 5 in a row. That game is 45.5. And then I'm going to throw Commanders Seahawks in there at 44.5. We got a decently close number there too. Do you have a game that you're really targeting? Anybody that any game that you're like, yeah, I think I like this more than other people do?
Well, a team, yeah, a couple. First, I think everybody knows I'm a big Joe Burrow fan, and I picked the Bengals to win the Super Bowl on our first show, and it wasn't looking good at the start.
It looks better than it did a month ago.
Yeah, Burrow had an injury. It's like everybody kind of started to doubt him. Now they've won 4 straight. They just beat the Bills. They just beat the Niners. Yep. Burrow looks great. Clearly a Super Bowl contender again. And I just kind of think all the best plays are on the Bengals this week, at least in the passing game, because Higgins is out. I don't know if he's been ruled out yet, but it doesn't look like Higgins is going to play.
He's going to be. All signs point to him being out.
Yeah, so, you got great spot for Chase, obviously. Bump to Tyler Boyd. Trentner won his minimum salary, and he got 10 targets the other game that Higgins was out in week 5. Yeah. So, I never need an excuse to play Burrow and the Bengals, and this is just a great spot. So definitely going to be on that. And, yeah, you mentioned that Seattle-Washington game. We tried targeting Washington last week with Mac Jones. It didn't quite work out, but their games have been great for fantasy. Sam Howell. Eric Bieniemy's got them throwing more than the Chiefs threw last year.
Yep.
68%, I believe. Highest in the league. And it's been even higher in the last month. We talked about how bad their defense has been, and it probably got worse with the trades. So kind of like the Seahawks or that game in general. Yeah, I don't know. I wanted to ask you about the Niners-Jags game. The game in general, and then there's some interesting players in that game that I'm sure we'll talk about later.
Before I jump into there, you're good with projections. Are people playing the Seahawks? Because I was hoping mine was going to be a tad sneaky on the Seattle side. I really like going back to Seattle, so we'll talk about when we talk about players. But do you see them as a team that's going to be popular this week or no?
Yeah, I'm right with you.
I thought maybe people would be over Geno.
I think people are. I don't think they're going to be popular.
Oh, good.
So, yeah, you're in business. Yeah, I think people are pretty disappointed with the Seahawks. Metcalf last week, 1 catch. Geno hasn't really done it yet. He might be, relatively popular, but I don't think any of their pass catchers or anyone else will.
Yeah, Niners-Jags is one of those games that's like really a really fun, good game, but I wonder, how much we get fantasy-wise. The hard part is the Jaguars defense is playing really well. They're a top 3 defense right now. And the Niners players are all expensive. Like McCaffrey's really expensive, aside from Purdy. But, Ayuk's still expensive. Debo is not too expensive. Kittle's expensive from a tight end spot. So it's like you have to really like them to play because none of those guys are cheap. I tend to like it's interesting because they're coming off the bye. I don't know what the Niners defense, like this is a weirdly gigantic game for the Niners in this season. It's a huge swing game. And I know it's week 10. Like they can still be fine if they lose, but like if they win, they're 6-3. They go home to play Tampa. They're gonna be like what an 8. If they win, they're gonna be like a 10-point favorite against Tampa. So you look at 7-3, and suddenly everything's good again. Like if you're 7-3, you're gonna make the playoffs. But no matter what, and they have the Ravens, the Eagles, and the Seahawks twice coming up after them. So you got like some really tough games coming up. But if you're 7-3, you feel pretty good. You split against Seattle, you're probably fine. And even if you lose the Ravens and Eagles, you're still gonna make the playoffs. If you lose this game and you're 5-4 and you've lost 4 in a row, good teams in the NFL don't lose 4 games in a row. I don't know. I'd have to look it up, but there's probably not a lot of teams that went really deep and lost 4 games in a row midseason. And none of those were against. They were tough teams, but none of those were like Ravens, Eagles, Cowboys. Like none of the top teams. Man, if you go 5-4 and you play badly on defense again, you're already moving the defensive coordinator from the booth to the field. Steve Wilkes is pretty much ordered to go down the field. This could get ugly fast. This is a gigantic swing game. I think they're going to come out pretty well. They look tired. They look beat up in the last couple games, and that should go away with the bye. This is a massive game. I'd like to say that they're going to respond, and I think they're going to win the game. But I'd be lying to you if I said that I knew that was going to happen because I don't know what to expect from the defense. I think that's the one big question mark is how the defense comes out. Yeah,
that was a fantastic breakdown. You got me fired up for that game. Definitely the most I got the most interest in watching that game of
It's gonna
any
be
of these
it's
other
gonna be a
games.
nerve-wracking early game in the house here. Like I think that it's just a really big game. It makes you go from like I feel pretty good about this team again to like holy crap, are they one of the biggest disappointments in a long time? It weirdly feels like a huge game.
Yeah, and I'd like to agree with you that they should come out strong after the bye, and because of everything you mentioned, it's a big game.
Yeah. And Trent Williams back at practice yesterday. Debo's back at practice. So, Aaron Banks, their left guard, is going to be out. But like the bigger names are back. Dre Greenlaw, who, was playing last week, so it wasn't full healthy. He changes their defense. He's fully healthy. So no excuses anymore. But I get Jacksonville's good. Jacksonville's like the kind of defense that just like it limits. It's like the bend but don't break kind of stuff. And they do that and they create turnovers. I think they've created 18 turnovers, which is first in the NFL. They have 11 interceptions. So, Brock's got to be careful with the ball. Obviously, it's weird because he's played really, really, really well the last 2 weeks, except for the fact that he's got the 5 turnovers, and that you just can't have that. You as well as you play, you do that, suddenly you didn't play well anymore. So I think it's like 9.1, 11.1 YPA in those 2 games. He was really good, made some good passes, but you can't have those turnovers. You can't play well and have those kind of turnovers. So I want to talk about Lions Chargers. That's the highest total game, 48.5. The Chargers offense did not look good on Monday. They didn't need to against the Jets, but like Herbert was at like 4.5 YPA. His numbers without Mike Williams look different than his numbers with Mike Williams. And that's not just Mike Williams. It's more just the way it kind of opens up everything in their offense, but they're looking for that second receiver. They don't really have a tight end they trust. So it's kind of just Keenan Allen and Eckler. Do you think Lions Chargers get back and forth? Because I think probably a month ago, we would have thought this is like kind of a high flying, 55 point kind of game.
Yeah, now it looks tough to stack. You wouldn't have expected the Lions to be 3-point favorites on the road in this spot.
Yeah. And they get David Montgomery back, which makes them harder to play for fantasy angles too.
Right. Harder to play. And their goal is going to be to run it with those guys, Montgomery and Gibbs, and get a lead and sort of sit on it. It could shoot out, but I don't know. Herbert in that offense hasn't.
The Chargers aren't that really that kind of shootout offense right now.
No,
I think we thought they would be, and they're just not right now.
Right, and the Lions aren't the greatest opponent for it. Not to mention that Herbert's expensive. Keenan Allen's really expensive. Mm-hmm. Amon-Ra's up. Yeah, it's an expensive stack, and you need there to be a lot of points there. So yeah, I think it's tough. I don't see myself getting there aside from maybe a one-off or two.
Speaking of games that are kind of bad looking on paper, but a middling total, Falcons Cardinals is 43.5. One of those games that nobody's really great, but man, it's funny. You made the joke last week that maybe Arthur Smith is doing this on purpose with Bijan, just to screw over fantasy owners. And then we made a joke about it, but man, last week it was like first and goal, didn't get a touch, and Jonnu Smith gets a carry. And then his press conference is weird again. He just kind of says, it's like a word salad. He just kind of says a bunch of stuff. It doesn't make sense. The Falcons are, this should be a good spot at Arizona. Kyler's back on the other side. So maybe, they can hang in more than they have been. But man, I don't know. It's hard to hard to kind of plant a flag for anybody in the Falcons, which is the way they're running their team right now.
Yeah, I agree. Same thing we said last week. And Bijan's $6K again. And he's going to be relatively popular again. And, it should be a good spot. But, it's tough for me based on everything we've seen this season and based on Arthur Smith. I think the Arizona side interests me a little more. I'm not sure what we're going to get out of Kyler Murray, but it's going to be a lot better than what we saw from Clayton Tune.
For sure.
And there's just some pieces on the Arizona side that I think are okay. Trey McBride for sure. And then either of their receivers, I think you can take chances on. The Falcons, though, I don't know. I have a tough time getting there. I get it, though. It's $6K for Bijan. You would think he has a lot of upside, but it just hasn't worked out that way.
Do you think there's a week at some point where he just gets 26 touches and they just kind of do it? I mean, it's week 10, so you can't just play it with that because you'd be losing money if you keep playing it week after week after
week.
I don't think he has a huge game. I mean, he has some. I know he's had some touchdowns in there, but there's no huge Bijan Robinson game we've gotten yet. And it's week 10. He's shown really well, like his yards per carry and all that kind of stuff. I'm looking, he has 3 touchdowns all year, and the two games we had 100 yards rushing, he did not have touchdowns. He doesn't have like that huge spike game at all. And we're in week 10. It's hard to keep just playing it and hoping.
Arthur Smith has, he's been so weird that, I guess it wouldn't surprise me if all of a sudden he went the other way. Just one random time, or like, for whatever reason, to show the media, to placate whoever, to just see if Bijan can do it. I mean, you never know with this guy. So, yeah, I don't know. Obviously, Bijan is so talented, and if he were to get 20-plus touches against the Arizona team and maybe some touches inside the red zone or inside the 5, it could happen. I don't know, Scott. Like, I've lost confidence.
Yeah, I mean, I have too. I don't know how you can't not lose confidence. I mean, he's at what? He's at I'm looking at his rate. He's at 5 yards per carry.
I don't know what they're doing.
He's at 5. Every time I look, I'm like, I wonder if he's at like 3.8 yards per carry, and I'm just like overstating this. He's at 5. He's at 103 carries for 517 yards right now.
Yeah, and we know how good he is in the passing
5
game
yards
too.
a carry. It's wild. Yeah.
Like, he clearly their best weapon. They don't have really a quarterback. So, like, it just doesn't make sense what they're doing.
It doesn't. These other, we've got 5 other games that are kind of lower totals, 41 and below. We've got Saints Vikings at 40.5, Titans Bucks at 39.5. I kind of find that game a little bit interesting based on what the Bucks did last week. Giants Cowboys 38.5 with a massive point spread. The Cowboys are minus 17 in that game. Obviously, the Giants are with Tommy DeVito are just an absolute mess. Browns Ravens 38.5. I think that's a really fun game, but a defensive game. Like, that's the game you flip on. You're like, I want to see some hits and some great defense. And then Packers Steelers at 38.5. Packers Steelers a few years ago would have been a fun game, but not at the moment with the quarterback play there. Steelers have punted on 49% of their possessions. That leads the NFL. It's not the Pittsburgh Steelers offense we're used to.
Yeah.
Any of those games you like as a stack game?
Yeah.
Like, what do you feel?
Yeah, one, and I think we probably agree that the Titans-Bucks game.
Yeah.
We saw what the Texans did to the Bucks last week, or just that game in general, 39-37. And both teams are pass funnels, right? At least, yeah, they are. Good run defenses, so it should be a good spot for Baker. Is cheap. You can play Mike Evans, Godwin, Cade Otton. I like Rachaad White. Rachaad White getting a ton of work involved in the passing game. And then, you don't have to roster any Titans, but I think you can play DeAndre Hopkins. I think Will Levis has looked capable, and I think that the Bucks pass defense is bad. So, yeah, I like some pieces from that game. The Giants implied total is like 11. Never seen anything like it. It's unbelievable.
It's funny. Usually when you get a 17-point spread, you have a bigger over/under because they have to build in some space for the really good team to score 30 points. But the 28 to 11 or whatever that works out to, 27 to 11. But like, that's a crazy number. That is wild. I mean, that anybody with survivor pools with Dallas, I think is a pretty automatic one this week. You don't get 17-point spreads in the NFL that often.
Yeah, I got to tell you, we'll talk about defense later, but I'm strongly considering paying $4,400 for the Cowboys.
Good tease right there. I like it. But with that, let's get into talking a bunch of players here. We'll hit kind of every position and every price range. First, enough from our sponsors at Circa. Get ready for the ultimate big game party at Circa Resort and Casino. Super Sunday is in Las Vegas this year. Watch the big game poolside at Stadium Swim's big game viewing party. It's a massive screen, booming game sound, and a view of the pyrotechnic and visual effects throughout the game. Snag the best seat in the sun with day beds, poolside boxes, cabanas, and more. Or touchdown at the world's largest sportsbook, Circa Sports, for the big game bash. 3 stories of football glory featuring a 78 million pixel screen. Book your seat with a variety of reservation options, including bottle service, open bar, stadium-style food, and more. Don't miss these legendary viewing experiences on February 11th. The big game party is only at Circa Resort and Casino. Reserve today at circalasvegas.com. So, Ryan, before we get into some tournament stacks and lineups and players, Any chalk boring plays this week? Cash game guys that everybody's going to have. I think you mentioned one earlier, probably in Trey McBride. He's still 3,500. Been active since Zach Ertz's been out. Kyler Murray's back for him. That fixes the Clayton Tune problem that we were worried about last week. I think we liked McBride, but from a standpoint of you wish he had somebody else throwing the ball. So I think he's probably popular at tight end. Is there anybody else you seeing really kind of breaking the ownership's chart this week with everybody's going to have this guy. Everybody's going to have him in cash. He's kind of an easy slot in right away.
Yeah, I think you nailed it with McBride. He's going to be crazy popular. For sure, you just play him in cash games at that price. Yeah. Other than that, the Bengals are going to be popular. The Bengals wide receivers. People are going to want to play Irwin at 3K and Boyd at 4.6, and for sure Chase. So all of the Bengals are going to be pretty popular. Running back is interesting because I'm not sure anyone's going to break away, but there's 4 or 5 guys that we're going to break down. And then quarterback, not too many options at quarterback either. So some guys will be kind of popular. I really only see 3 or 4 quarterbacks that people are going to play in cash games, 3 really. So those guys, I mean, I guess we can just start there. I think Burrow is going to be popular at 6,800.
Yeah, if you want to save there's only 2 quarterbacks over 7,000 this week.
Right, and I guess you're not going to play Lamar in that matchup against Cleveland, at least not in cash games. It just he doesn't project well. The total's low. Cleveland has a good defense. You can play him in tournaments. A
lot of bust game too.
Right. So you can't do that in cash games. You can't do Herbert based on what we've seen and what we said already. So it really starts at Burrow. And it's a great spot for him. If you want to save some money, you could choose either QB in the Seattle-Washington game. Howell's just been throwing so much. I like Geno a little more, but both project well. And if you want to save a little more money, you could play Baker at 5,100. But, other than that, I don't see much. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, in a kind of a cash game, easy, got to slide this guy's in. I don't see that much either. I mean, Baker or Taylor Heineke, I think probably works at 5,100. Heineke is going against Arizona, who's 31st in pressure rate, 29th completion rate, 29th in YPA allowed. I think that could work too. But it's kind of rough in these streets at a quarterback in a cash game. I think that I think Burrow becomes even more popular than we think. I think everybody just kind of clicks Burrow this week there.
Yeah, it's hard not to. It feels good, especially based
on the lack
of other options.
In that cash game, I think you just go Burrow or you go down to someone in the low 5s and kind of just save a bunch of money. But let's talk tournaments and stacks. Let's start with Burrow. He's 6,800. I think in tournaments he'll be popular too, especially if Higgins doesn't play. It's easy to get you go Burrow Chase, or you can go Burrow Chase Irwin, you mentioned earlier. And I don't think Higgins is going to play. Burrow was great on Sunday night, 348, 2 touchdowns against the Bills, was awesome against the Niners. I was super impressed with him against the Niners. He looked, and you could tell it's all the calf. He can move around. It's not that he, run for a bunch of yards, but it's escapability, getting a first down with his legs if he needs to, but getting out of the pocket and making a play is just so different than it was the first 3 weeks of the season. The Texans are bad in completion rate YPA. They really limit touchdowns, but I think that's kind of fluky there too. And the key with this game is that Houston, what we've seen last week, they should be able to score and kind of make this back and forth. So I think I think Burrow in tournaments is the popular play too. And I think he's just the popular play across the board in all formats.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I hate to hear it because obviously I want to do it too.
Why isn't he 7,500 this week? Is it because they played Sunday night and then adjust? But he clearly should not be 6,800. He's less than Stroud.
Right.
He's same price as Dak and right there with Goff. When I clicked on his name, I just kind of assumed he'd be in the 7,000s. I was really surprised he wasn't.
Yeah, I think it's because he's coming up from being down so low. They had him all the way down to 6K, based on the slow start kind of. Yeah, I really want to play them, stack them in tournaments too. They're going to be very popular, like you said. I think there are ways to do it. How I'm going to do it is play running backs that aren't popular for the most part. Maybe run it back with
that's a really good overall point too. You can play popular guys as long as you just kind of do something different somewhere else too. I mean, if he's your favorite play and you love him, and you got to do it and just find ways to get different elsewhere.
Right, and that's what I'm going to do. Also for tournaments, I'll let you talk about it, but I do have interest in Geno Smith and the Seahawks.
Yeah, I'm going back here one more time. I know I played. We talked about DK last week. I thought I was feeling good about it. He had the 50-yard catch in the first half. I was like, all right, here we go. And then didn't catch another ball the rest of the game. It was just a mess. They got absolutely smoked. I think I said last week I thought Baltimore's the best team in the NFL. Obviously, that changed from watching that game last week. That team's a monster. That defense is really, really good. But Geno's been bad. I mean, Geno's been fantasy wise. He has one top 12 week all year. But, Washington is 22nd in pressure rate, and they just traded their two best pass rushers. We talked about that. They have a lot of league-high 19 touchdown passes to quarterbacks. They're, 30th in passing points per game. It's just a great matchup. They're at home. He's 5,800. He's, as cheap as he's going to get. It's all this bad stuff has depressed that price. I'm going back this week. He's got everybody. We need DK to be healthy. I know he's questionable. But if you go DK, Lockett, JSN, he's got weapons. I usually think it's kind of a last stand for me with Geno. I think the situation's perfect. I'm hoping that everybody just kind of plays Burrow and nobody wants to go back to Geno. I love stacking Geno in the receivers this week. I just think it's my favorite non-Burrow play on the slate.
Yep, I agree with everything you said. And I was making the argument to myself that you can go down the list of Geno's recent games and sort of make some excuses. At Baltimore is tough. Cleveland is a great defense. Arizona never pushed them and they didn't need to do anything. At Cincinnati was tough in a game that Burrow played really well. And then, you see he did okay against Detroit. I'm just saying it's a small sample size. I know he's been disappointing. So, yeah, I can see it. This is a fantastic matchup, and I'm going to stack him as well.
So what about the other side of the ball? Do you? I like him. I like him over Howell this week. They're the same price, so they're very comparable. Obviously, another good week for Howell. He was QB 10 last week. They have 40 plus pass attempts in all the last 3 weeks, and but tough matchup. Seattle's secondary is good. They've been good versus quarterback, but I like the fact they're throwing so much just because I like it on the other side. I like the fact that I think Washington can do enough to make Geno keep throwing the ball. Like, I think Seattle's going to win this game. I don't think they're going to blow him out though. So that helps a lot with Geno. Just, Washington's going to throw it a ton. They're going to try and stay in the game. I like that, but they're the same price. So for me, I'm just taking Geno instead.
Yeah, me too. And I'm not going to play Howell, but I'll just play, McLaurin or Dotson likely as a one-off. Run it back with one of them.
Spoiler alert, but Dotson for me, because I think Seattle's a lot tougher on outside receivers, and Dotson's in the slot, a little more than a third of the time. Seattle's outside guys are really good. What do you do with Jared Goff? I think it's tough for me to get to Herbert at 7,700. The Lions have been kind of bad against good quarterbacks and good against bad ones, so maybe that serves well for Herbert. This good game we talked about, could get back and forth. But what do you do with Goff? He's 6,400. He's 1,300 less than Herbert. He's been so spike or bust this week. He has 3 top 8 weeks, and then he has 4 weeks where he's quarterback 18 or worse. So he's either been great or just kind of blah. Chargers have been really bad versus any good quarterback. They're 29th in passing points per game, 31st in YPA. The Chargers play a lot of zone, and Goff is really good against zone. We talked about it last week with Bryce Young, and I should have I tried to talk myself out of it by talking about how he wasn't good versus zone, and the Colts play a lot of that, and it didn't work. But this is the opposite. The Chargers play a lot of zone. Goff eats up zone. So does Amon-Ra. I think at 6,400 you can get to Goff pretty easily, and it works pretty well. Goff versus Geno is tough for me because I do like Geno this week, but I think Goff is probably my third favorite at 6,400.
Yeah, I have some interest in Goff too, and Amon-Ra. The question for me is, who on the Chargers side, specifically, like Eckler versus Keenan, in what type of game environment, where Goff is throwing for 350 yards,
Yep.
Who's doing it on the Chargers side?
And Amon-Ra and Keenan are both over 8K. So it's hard to just go Goff, Amon-Ra, Keenan. The rest of your lineup, you better have some cheapies you really like, because that's 2 8K receivers makes it tough fast.
Maybe you can play Quentin Johnson.
There you go. We'll get talk about cheap receivers later. I don't think it's the worst idea. On the field a lot, at least. He played. Josh Palmer's out. Obviously, Mike Williams is out. He played 90+% of the snaps and routes run last week, but it was 2 catches, 14 yards with it. So hasn't shown he could do anything with the opportunity yet. But he's going to get the opportunity again.
Yeah, I haven't quite given up.
What about these cheap quarterbacks? We try to talk that Lamar and Herbert are tough to play this week. We like these mid-range guys. Between Baker at 5,100, Heineke at 5,100, you got Purdy down here at 5,700, Will Levis at 5,300. Is there anybody that if you're going to save a quarterback, you're going to go to that person?
I doubt that I go below Geno, but maybe Baker. Maybe Baker.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I feel the same way, except I'm maybe Heineke is same kind of I'd probably just play Geno at 5,800 and don't go below there. I'd love to play Brock this week. I just don't think I could do it. I don't think the Jacksonville defense is the one I want to do it against. At 5,700, he's been really good. I think they're going to play well. Jags haven't really pressured the quarterback well, but it's just that bend but don't break. Just kind of they've been limited explosive plays, and 5,700, I'd probably just go Geno or Howell instead.
Yeah, I'm with you. The reason I said Baker is because I have a little bit of interest in Mike Evans. With Heineke, I don't know who to pair him with. Him. Purdy especially. I never it just.
Yeah, especially with everybody back. I think the Niners receivers are hard to play when all three of them are when Ayuk and Debo and Kittle are all playing. It's hard to figure. I think I'd just go Ayuk because he's just been so consistent. But when all three of them play, you can kind of cross Kittle off. His good games are usually when one of those other two guys doesn't play. I always find it hard to get to George when the two guys are healthy.
Yeah, me too.
So let's jump into running backs. But first, a note from our sponsors at Splash. RotoWire is proud to partner with Splash Sports for the 2023 fantasy football season. Splash Sports empowers gaming commissioners to earn by creating contests. Commissioners can set up contests, add their style, and enjoy the evolving Splash Sports platform for customized preferences. From daily to season-long contests, Splash Sports caters to various playing styles, such as DFS, pick'em games, and traditional Survivor. And unlike traditional sports books, Splash Sports pits you against friends and family, not the house. Splash goes beyond betting, a space where friends can connect, strategize, and share in the excitement of sports. RotoWire will be running weekly DFS tier contests on Splash Sports all season. Can you beat the RotoWire experts? Visit rotowire.com/splash to enter today. That is always very tough, and I got the Splash Sports out the way I was supposed to. So what do we do at running back? There are a handful of expensive guys. I guess I'll start kind of 8K and above. McCaffrey's 9,200, obviously really, really expensive. You kind of have to figure out a build to play him. Eckler's 8,400. Kamara off the disappointing game last week. A lot of people liked him last week. 8,300. Did not do very much with that game and that matchup, which we liked. The guys are over 8,000. What do you find yourself doing this week at running back?
Yeah, I don't have too much interest. I think you can get there though if you're going to punt Irwin and Trey McBride, for instance. You could get up to McCaffrey.
Yep.
I think it's interesting because it might be contrarian. It probably will be contrarian, and it's a tough matchup. But McCaffrey is playable in any matchup.
Scored every week.
Yep, it's unbelievable. Really, he does fine in tough matchups. He just might do it in a different way.
5.0 yards per carry with Trent Williams, 3.6 yards per carry without Trent Williams.
And Trent's back?
Trent is practiced yesterday. He's questionable, but leaning towards back.
Yeah, so, I'm not going to rule out McCaffrey. But, yeah, I don't. So, running back just in general, I don't think I really like any running back on the whole slate.
It's funny as I went through, I'm like, when am I going to find somebody that I really want to highlight and love? And there are a couple, and they're in the seven.
Yeah, there are a couple.
They're in the 7,000s for me, actually.
Yes.
But it's not a week where it's automatic. I love these guys. It's a really tough running back week.
Right. So I wanted to ask you. The first, Tony Pollard is projecting well in such a great matchup against the Giants. He's been a major disappointment this season, but he's cheap and the matchup is good. And then Etienne is there too, who's been great this season, and he's going to be less popular than Pollard. I wanted to ask you, what's your take on those two, and just in general, the spot for Etienne against the Niners run defense?
Yeah, a lot of it is what you think the Niners run D is going to look like. They've been bad. They've been getting thrashed the last few games. ATN dominates the running back touches. I think it's probably the most important thing. Like if there's a running back touch, it's to ETN. He's on fire before the bye. 7 touchdowns the last 4 games. His rush number is kind of poor aside from the touchdowns. The last 3, he wasn't really running the ball well, but he does so much out of the backfield. He had the big receiving touchdown. I like that as a play. The Tony Pollard one is the hardest thing because it's another week where he was quiet again last week. It was against the Eagles. I get it, but he's just had so many weeks where he's been quiet. They've had weird blowout situations, but he dominates backfield touches too. I don't think he's the same player he was. I think that injury that the Jimmy Ward. I think it was a Jimmy Ward tackle in the playoff game. Maybe he's not fully back, but did have this matchup is fantastic against the Giants. You worry that they get too far ahead and maybe limit his touches, but Josh Jacobs had 90 yards in a get well spot against the Giants last week. We were kind of wondering if Josh Jacobs came back, hit 2 touchdowns. They're allowing 4.8 yards per carry. They're 20th in rushing yards to receivers, maybe 30th. I think it's 30th. The only problem with Pollard is can they blow him out too much? And the Cowboys have had some games where they have, like the game against New England, they blew him out so much. There's no reason to risk Pollard. But I love this spot. I think I'm going back to it. This is my kind of going back to week. I'm going Geno. I'm going Tony Pollard. I think this is both good weeks for them. And I think that I think Pollard gets enough in the first 3 quarters that he plays out really well at 7,300.
Okay, good. Yeah, I tend to agree with everything that you said. I have Pollard in my cash game lineup currently. I'm pretty sure that I'm going to play him. The matchup's just so good. Almost anyone could succeed in this spot. I was surprised at how easy it looked for Josh Jacobs last week.
Yeah, it did look easy. The Giants are just bad. My only concern is that CD catches 2 touchdowns and Ferguson gets 1, and they're like, let's just chill Tony. But I think that they're going to make sure that he gets a little bit too. In a tournament, do you have any interest in going up $100 to Derrick Henry, who has 100 plus total yards in 3 straight and 4 of his last 5? I've stunned Ryan with my Tony Pollard question. I think he froze for a second there.
Sorry, I'm back.
All right, you're good. I said, do you have any interest in a tournament going up $100 to Pollard to a much less popular Derrick Henry this week?
Yeah, I thought about it, but
100 plus yards in 3 straight games and 4 of his last 5. Most interesting, 4 targets in each of the Will Levis's starts, so they're using him a little bit out of the backfield. But the Bucs are good against the run. You mentioned the pass funnel earlier. They haven't allowed a running back touchdown all year, I don't believe. So the matchup's not great, but man, Henry quietly kind of looks like the old Derrick Henry these last few weeks.
Yeah, he does. I'd love to do it. It's normally. Yeah, I don't really roster running backs at Tampa Bay. I feel like you could break that here. Like I hate to just have a rule like that, just because the running backs on this slate, especially the expensive ones, aren't great. So 20 plus points and you could be the highest scorer at the position. I don't know. Like I probably won't do it, but I get it.
He is it fair to say he's significantly less popular than Pollard and ATN?
Oh yeah, way. Nobody's going to play Derrick Henry, so that's the reason in itself for sure.
That's why I like it. He's got 2 guys that are going to be popular. Everybody's talking about Pollard and ATN this week. 2 guys are popular right in the same range, which I think makes him really intriguing in a tournament.
That's a good point. Yeah, really, no one's going to click him, and yeah, can you see him outscoring Tony Pollard for sure?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. Saquon, 7,700. I don't think I could. He looked really good again last week, 113 yards. I just don't think I could do it with a terrible quarterback in a game. They're 17-point underdogs against Dallas. Saquon's awesome. I love Saquon. We talked about him last week. I liked him more than Kamara. I think he outscored him. I hope he outscored him to say that. But I don't think I could do it this week at 7,700.
No, me either. No.
What about the guys in the 6,000 range? I think that Joe Mixon is going to be popular, although everybody's playing the Bengals pass catcher, so maybe not people don't get to Mixon, but he looks better the last couple of weeks. He scored the last couple of weeks, top 12 running back the last couple of weeks. Another guy who dominates backfield touches. Aaron Jones, your Packers in here, 6,500. Bijan, 6,000. And I'm just going to go ahead and throw Rachaad White in this range. He's 5,800. What do you do in the mid-range here? I usually love the mid-range running backs. I don't as much this week.
Yeah, me either. I mean, you mentioned the top 4 guys, Mixon, Aaron Jones, Bijan, and Rachaad White. Those are the top 4 guys. They project the best. I think Mixon's going to be the most popular. I don't know. What else can we say about Mixon? We talk about it over and over again. People constantly get disappointed by him. He always projects well. He's still cheap in this spot. But you mentioned he's been doing better lately. You got to think he's got a lot of touchdown equity in this spot. He's still been catching passes. So I think it's fine. I think it's fine for cash games, but I'm just done in general ever trying to sell anyone on Mixon.
Yeah.
So, play him if you want to or don't. It's a pretty good spot. Kind of the same with Bijan. I mean, it's another one of those decisions that nobody can really tell you. He's cheap and it's a pretty good spot, but we already talked about it at the start. Like, nobody really knows. If you want to take a chance on him, feel free. So that being said, I kind of prefer Rachaad White because he's cheaper and I just feel more comfortable. So, I mean, at the moment, I might end up playing Mixon, but at the moment I have Pollard and White. Maybe I'll play all three in cash. Usually I would avoid running backs against the Titans, but it hasn't really been like that recently. They've given up some big scores to opposing running backs. They also have a quarterback who's making like his second or third start, and Rachaad White, even if he does get stuffed on the ground, he's going to be involved in the passing game. He has 17 catches over the last 3 games, 20-plus yard reception in all those games. The Buccaneers are favorites at home. So, yeah, kind of like Rachaad White.
I weirdly do too.
It's weird, Scott, because I've never really been on him before. He's one of those
I haven't
guys.
either, and I didn't draft him anywhere. I didn't like the draft price. But
yeah,
you look at Tennessee against the ground. I mean, Najee and Jaylen Warren last week had like 170 yards combined, somewhere in there. They ran the ball really well that week, and the week before, Bijan was 11 for 62. So he wasn't. He just didn't get that many touches, but it was effectiveness touches, and so they're not even quite the same run defense last couple of weeks. Rashaad's got 99 plus yards in the last 3 weeks. Like, he's got the yards in each game. You mentioned the 17 catches, like that jumps off the page in the last 3 games. 2 touchdowns last week. He's my favorite guy in this range. I didn't think I'd be saying that at this point in the season either. The Bijan thing is tough. I mean, at some point he's probably going to have a spike week, but like, how many times do you need to keep paying for it? Like, I just don't. Arthur Smith has got to show me that he's been willing to give him the ball 20 touches, and he's not even close to that right now. He had 11 carries last week. And it's just, and he has one touch inside the 5 all season long. They have 11. I think they have 11 plays, and one of the touches gone to him. Like, that is, I know people complain like we don't know what we're talking about. Arthur Smith runs great offense. He's smart. Like, I get it, but 1 out of 11 touches inside the 5 is just stupid. I'm sorry.
Yep, I agree. Zach Moss ran for 165 against the Titans, 89 yards before contact. Whew. So, I mean, I don't mind, the Titans defense hasn't been as good against the run.
Any super cheap running backs? We get, under 5,500 or so. We've got Jerome Ford's down here, 5,300. Is there any way possible you can get yourself to play Najee Harris under 5,000? He's 4,900, had 18 touches and a touchdown last week. Obviously, they split the carries a lot, but he's the goal line guy. I think it's like 8-1 or something like that in between him and Jalen inside the 5. Green Bay is kind of below average against running backs. Can you get there at 4,900 for Najee?
Yeah, he's the one guy I was going to bring up, and the guy I was going to ask you about.
I think the price is finally there where, like, if you need to save money, I don't think it's a bad play anymore. I'm never a Najee Harris guy, but under 5,000 is really cheap considering the fact that he gets all the goal line carries.
Yep, I agree. Same. It's cheap. It's a good spot. And, if you need 1,000, it really can't be too much worse than Bijan or Rachaad White or like you. So, yeah, I think it's relatively safe at that price. If you need to go there, I think it's fine.
I'd go there over Jerome Ford just because I think Jerome Ford, Kareem Khan's taken all the goal line carries and just kind of it just kills his upside. Like, you hope he had 25 touches last week. So, like, he's really involved. He can get the big play, but like, when you take away all the goal line carries, it's tough. And then the Ravens defense is just so nasty. I mean, Kenneth Walker had 16 yards last week.
Yep. No, I agree. And I'd also go there over Devin Singletary.
Was that an awful game by him last week.
Awful. And he's going to project well again if Pierce gets ruled out. And, yeah, I'm not going to play him.
No, I'm not either. I think Houston's going to pass the ball and just kind of realize that they're not hitting the ball to Singletary enough times where I want to even get involved in that. Let's jump over to receivers now. We've talked about some of the expensive guys, but there are, I think, 4 guys that people will play over 8,000, or at least, jumped out to me as interesting in that range. Obviously crossing on, who did I cross off? Oh, obviously Justin Jefferson's not playing. So you got 4 guys over 8,000. Keenan Allen is 8,800. Jamar Chase is 8,600. CeeDee Lamb, 8,500. Amon-Ra St. Brown, 8,300. I love Amon-Ra and Chase this week. I don't think I'll be by myself in that at all. A lot of people like both those guys this week. What are you doing over here, 8,000? I think I'm going Chase and Amon-Ra myself.
Yeah, me too. I think we've already spoken about it. I'm not going to get to Keenan. CeeDee's been amazing. Looked great. Definitely worried about the blowout there. And
I mean, it's hard. You get games where if they blow out, it's fine. But that's just such a massive spread. It's hard.
Right. He would have to run very efficiently. And of course he can. Yeah. But I'm with you, Chase and Amon-Ra.
Yeah, Dak got a lot of heat for the end of the game last week against the Eagles, man. I thought he played really, really well up to that, though. He's played really well 3 weeks in a row. Since that Niners game, he's been really, really good.
Yes, impressive for sure. Yeah, they could have won that Eagles game.
Yeah, I really like Amon-Ra, probably my favorite guy in this range here. 8,300. He has 100 yards or a touchdown in all 7 games he's played this year. Like I mentioned before, the Chargers play a ton of zone. Amon-Ra, great against zone. I just love the matchup here. Should be a good game script. It's got the highest total. I don't think either of us think it's going to be like a pure shootout, but man, they're gonna try and run the ball. You're right, but when they throw it, it's going to be him and Laporta. I think 8,300. I think you play him with Goff, play him without Goff. It works really well. I like Chase too, but I'd probably go Amon-Ra for Chase if I had to pick. But I think I'm mostly Amon-Ra on 8,000. Is there? You mentioned Mike Evans. There's only 2 guys listed in the 7,000s at all this week. It's Brandon Ayuk, 7,100. We mentioned that if Debo's going to play, Kittle's going to play, it's always hard to figure out who's going to get it. I do like Ayuk the most, but 7,100 is fully priced. Evans at 7,200. It sounds like you're interested there.
Well, that's really the only reason. It's because he's the only guy, and no one's going to play him. I
can't remember there being 2 receivers in the 7,000 range ever on DraftKings.
Ever.
It's just
right?
There's always 4 or 5 names in here. There's 2 names total. It's not 2 names I'm interested in. There's only 2 guys listed here at all.
Yeah, and Evans, it's a good matchup against the Titans, and we just know he's always a guy that can have 100 yards and 2 touchdowns, even if it's 4 catches. And that would break the slate for 7,200 most likely. So yeah, I was just looking at him as a leverage option. I think it's interesting, and I might try to get there.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, and it's just weird that this range is so empty. I mean, Ayuk is. I like Ayuk too. I think if you want to play him in that game, it's a decently high total game. I think it's the 3rd highest on the slate. Someone's gonna get some action there. I just the bend but don't break by Jacksonville's tough, just because you might not get those big plays by Ayuk, but I mean every game he's consistently involved. He's got 6+ targets every single week, even when Debo and Kittle play. Like week 1. Those guys, I think was Kittle out week 1? I think Kittle was out week 1. 8 for 1. Or maybe he played. He's 829 for 2 touchdowns. But it's just, Kittle, Ayuk's been great. I just think he's fully priced. I think he's a fine play, but not one of those guys I'm like, oh, I gotta click that 7,100. But the mid-range is really interesting for me with receivers. I guess we'll go 6 to 7 to start because there's a lot of guys I like in the 5s, but 6 to 7 to start. And interesting names, we got you got DK at 6,800, Olave 6,400, Tyler Lockett 61, and then D-Hop and Christian Kirk are both exactly 6,000. I think it's a good range. I like a couple guys in here, but I'll let you start. Who jumps out to you in the 6,000s at receiver?
I like DK, for the reasons you mentioned. I just think he has a lot of upside, and this is a great matchup, and no one's going to play him.
It's week 10. He doesn't have a top 12 wide receiver game yet.
It's unbelievable. Is he ever going to do it?
Yes.
I think so, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's DK. He has 100-yard game and 2 touchdowns all year. But, man, Washington cannot guard outside receivers.
Yeah, so it's just a great spot. So I like DK. You can make a fine argument for Olave, but the guy I'll make an argument for is D-Hop. I don't think they're going to be able to run the ball. I think Levis has looked decent, and I also think that this, a guy like Levis who's making one of his first starts on the road, he's just going to focus on D-Hop. I'd be shocked if D-Hop doesn't get over 10 targets. So So yeah, I think the Bucks pass defense has been horrible. CJ Stroud just shredded them. So yeah, I'm looking to play some D-Hop, I think. What about you in this range?
I love Hopkins at 6,000. I think it lines up really nicely. We talked about last week. D-Hop only had 4 for 60, but he still had 11 targets. I think that's the key number there. You mentioned it before. I think it's a good point. He's going to have 10 targets. I think that's pretty much locked in. Obviously, Tampa Bay got thrashed last week. You mentioned the first time ever 3 pass catchers with over 30 points with Schultz, Tank Dell, and Noah Brown. Noah Brown, my gosh. But yeah, it's just I think it's a really good setup for Hopkins, and I love DK. I mean, I think it's just Washington's dead last in 20 plus yard catches by wide receivers. I think just it lines up really well. Hasn't done a lot, but he still gets a lot of deep balls, still gets a lot of looks. It's just I think if it's not Geno DK this week, it's never going to be. Like, this is a perfect setup. It's a really good matchup. It works out great. They both need a bounce back game. DK had 1 catch last week. There's no way he's not in the offensive meeting rooms being like, dude, what are we doing here? How do I get 1 catch? I love it there. I think if you wanted to go Lockett instead, if you DK Lockett's always hard to argue, but I go DK just based on the fact that Washington has trouble with outside receivers rather than slot receivers. So yeah, Hopkins and Metcalf are going to be on a lot of my teams this week. I love them both. Hopkins getting 40% of the air yards on the Titans with Levis. So like he just not only is focusing on him, but it's big plays. I think he's going to hit one. We saw the 3 touchdowns a couple weeks ago. I love it too. I think we're in lopstick there. I don't love if I'm going to go Jacksonville receivers. I like Ridley more than Kirk, so I'm not playing Kirk at 6,000. Niners are really good against slot receivers. The place to get them is outside receivers. They're middle of the field with Warner and Hufanga and Greenlaw is really good. So I think that I like outside receivers more than slots against the Niners. So I would go Ridley over Kirk. So probably not going to play Kirk at 6,000 myself.
Yep, I agree with you. I'm not going to play Kirk at 6,000 either. I mean, he'll probably be relatively popular. He always is at that price. So, yeah, I'll avoid that. The last thing about Hopkins, looks like he still has some juice left. A lot of people, I think, thought he was sort of old and washed up, and he still looks pretty good out there to me.
Comment in the chat that someone was listening to a Jaguars stream and they said the Niners are going down. Well, I wouldn't expect much else out of a Jaguars stream, but I think the Jaguars could win this game. They won 5 in a row, and Niners are 3-point favorites on the road. But yeah, what we've seen in the last 3 weeks, the Niners defense won't be able to stop Lawrence. I think we see a different defense though. But I love the 5,000 range at receiver this week. There are 4 or 5 names in here that I do really, really like and I find very playable this week. Who do you like in the 5,000s? Where are you going here? Because I think I'm just looking at, I have like 5 guys I bolded here. I really like this range as a way to maybe play 2 of the guys in this range and be able to play some expensive guys elsewhere.
Yeah, I do too. Starting all the way at the bottom, I like Jahan Dotson, as you mentioned before. Not only is he cheaper than McLaurin, he's been doing better than McLaurin lately, and it's also a better spot. You mentioned Seattle is good on the outside, so I like Dotson. I do think McLaurin's fine though, for 5,800. I also like Tank Dell, 5,500. He was amazing last week, caught the 2 late touchdowns to complete the comeback. He's looked explosive all year, so I like Tank Dell, and I kind of like Hollywood Brown. We've been trying to make Hollywood Brown work with bad quarterback play, and maybe he'll get bad quarterback play again with Kyler back, but maybe he won't. We saw him have big games with Kyler in the past, and 5,200 is a pretty good price, so I have some interest there. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think you make some good points in there. I like McLaurin too. I think Marquise Brown at 5,200, it just kind of works. Like he has the highest inaccuracy rate in the NFL among receivers with a certain number of catches. So like he just had a lot of targets but bad balls. Like it's hard to play with who he's played with. But the guy I really like in here is actually Deontay Johnson at 5,400 against the Packers. He finally scored, so we have like that. That's off his back. We don't have to worry about that anymore. But he had 9 targets last week. He was 7 for 90. He has 31% of the targets since he returned. I just think this is a combination of like targets plus he's just a talented guy at 5,400. I think he's underpriced. I think he's one of the guys you can throw in there and he's not going to bust. And he could have a really good week. So I think the floor is really nice with some ceiling. You get me that in the mid 5,000. I kind of want to take that every time.
Yeah, no, that's a good call. I guess I shouldn't be ignoring. I've just sort of been ignoring that Pittsburgh Green Bay game.
It's hard to blame me too much for that, but that's my favorite piece there. I just think that like he's going to get 8 to 10 targets, I think. And you give me that, and there's kind of no way he's really bad as long as you get the targets. And then, I mean, he scores, and he's really, really good at that price. So I just think the talent plus the opportunity, I think 5,400 is just kind of too low for Deontay. I just think they'll just going to use him a bunch. He's going to get action, and give me that with a really talented player every time.
Yeah, it could be a pretty good matchup for him too, actually, or like a sneaky good matchup. The Packers offense hasn't been able to sustain drives, and I'd imagine that Jair would be on Pickens more. I don't know. I feel like Johnson lines up in different spots, and the Packers haven't really been good against slot guys. So yeah, I can get behind him. That's a pretty good leverage play right there. Just a good play in general, but I don't think people are going to be on him just because they're not on that game.
Yeah, probably my favorite play at receiver this week. I just think that you get the combo there. It's really nice. The other guy I want to talk about real quick is Calvin Ridley. Super inconsistent season, but as I mentioned before, when I mentioned with Kirk, like the Niners, having trouble with outside receivers. They've been kind of smoked by some guys lately. He was good last game. He had 6 for 83. They had the bye last week, but the 2 weeks ago against Pittsburgh on 10 targets. I just think it's another guy that's talented for this price. It clearly is not the floor that someone like Deontay has. I mean, Ridley's had some really bad games too. But I think he's very playable at 5,600. I think if Jacksonville scores, it's kind of on with these outside receivers.
Yeah, I agree.
In the pass game, I should say. ETN obviously can score too in the run game, but I like that one. I think it's Ridley and Johnson are kind of the guys in the middle that I do really like this week, but probably Deontay's my favorite one. What about under 5,000? I think I'll keep Jahan Dotson here because he's exactly 5,000. Just kind of make it easy. Again, the key with Deontay or with Jahan Dotson has been the targets. The last 3 weeks have been different than the other rest of the season. He has 8, 10, and 8 last week. I mentioned before he plays like 35% of his plays in the slot, which it helps. Seattle is better against outside receivers. I think if you're going to go a run back with against Geno, I think for me it's Dotson. He was 69 yards and a touchdown last week. I prefer him to McLaurin this week as much as I do always like McLaurin, but I think I prefer Dotson this week.
Yep, I'm with you. Below that,
yeah, I was gonna say give me some below that because there's a lot of names. Well, there's a lot of names down here, but it's all come with a little bit of concern.
Yeah, I'll let you talk about Christian Watson.
I'm not going to do it. So you have to do it because I'm not talking about it.
Okay. Well, I'm not doing it.
Along with playing the wrong rookie quarterback last week, playing Christian Watson last week was a disaster.
Yep. Yeah, I'm just not going to do it.
Did he have 1 catch last week?
He had 1 catch.
And like 2 targets, right?
Yeah, and 2 targets. Like at this point, it's pretty clear that it's hard for any of Jordan Love's pass catchers to have a big game. So it doesn't matter how good of a player Watson is. Love just isn't conducive for these guys to have big games right now.
And there's like 3 receivers, so it's not like he's gonna just like get it's just it.
Right.
He could always hit a big play. We know that, but I made the mistake last week, and I'm not going back with this offense.
Yeah. And now Aaron Jones back healthy is a clear focal point for that team. Yeah. I think I might be a little boring with these cheap guys. I'm gonna kind of keep it simple. I mentioned the Bengals, so Boyd and Irwin for sure. They're gonna be popular though. Other guys I like, Smith and Jigba in that Seattle-Washington game. 6 catches again last week. Caught a touchdown in 2 of the last 3. Looks pretty good out there. And then I'm not opposed to taking another chance on Quentin Johnson. He's another one of these guys that I understand if you're completely done with him. I mean, he's had injuries now to Mike Williams and Josh Palmer and still can't make it work, which is very surprising. But I'm in to take another shot here. I mean, he's cheap, and you mentioned he was out there for 90% of the plays or whatever. He's supposedly a first-round talent, so I'm in on giving him another chance. I guess the one I'll mention another 3K guy, just because you never know, but Rondale Moore is 3K, and we've mentioned Hollywood Brown and Trey McBride, and Rondale Moore's there too, and he's got big play upside. We've seen it before, and I don't mind that with Kyler back. What do you think about all these cheap guys?
It's tough. I mean, Tyler Boyd is so freaking boring.
He is. Like, he's a tough tournament play. He's one of those guys that you feel like he's just going to get like 6 for 50 or something.
If you're playing him, you're like hoping for 650, but a touchdown, right?
Right, exactly.
He hasn't topped 60 yards all year. I know that Higgins has played some of those games, but like even the non-Higgins game, I think it was week 5, Higgins didn't play. He was 6 for 39 on 7 targets. Last week, he got a lot of action. 57 snaps, he was 3 for 56. Like it's just, it can work.
A boring play.
It is a boring play, but he's 4,600 with a great quarterback in a really good offense with one of the higher implied totals. So I do get it. I think I'd probably just go Trent Irwin and save the 1,600. You mentioned he had 10 targets when Higgins had the first time. Yeah, I kind of have the same names here. It's kind of boring, but I think the 2 rookies at 4,100, Quentin Johnson and JSN. JSN was the one guy who did well last week for Seattle. He had 7 targets. He was 6 for 63. It's a great matchup, but they have 3 guys, so it just always makes it a little bit tough. But he's clearly more involved the last 3 weeks than he has been. I think he's slowly kind of taking away some stuff from Lockett, which is probably makes it tougher to play Lockett at 6,100. But Quentin's right there too, like talented, but hasn't done anything with it. So it's kind of a leap of faith. But at 4,100 is a lot easier to make a leap of faith than it is in someone like Bijan at 6,000. I have one pivot down here though. Like I think everybody's going to play Trent and Irwin at 3,000. I think there's going to be a lot of Trent Irwin plays. You mentioned Rondell Moore could be an interesting pivot there. I kind of think Kyle Phillips in Tennessee is an interesting pivot. He was active last week with no trade after Treylon Burks got hurt. I don't think Treylon's going to play this week. I'm pretty sure he's not going to play. Phillips was 4 of 68 on 5 targets. Will Levis' second game. Hard to read too much into that, but maybe Will Levis, practice squad, in practice, scout team has been playing with Kyle Phillips. I think it's kind of an interesting pivot. Everybody down here is a shot in the dark at 3,000. So I kind of like going with the much less popular guy. I think I'm going to play some Kyle Phillips over Irwin in some lineups.
I think that is a really good call. Yeah. He looked like a guy that Levis trusts, and that's going to be out there. I mean,
he kind of felt like he's like, I'm in trouble. I'll just flip it to Kyle real quick.
Yeah, for sure. And Kyle looked pretty good. Yeah, you mentioned Burks is going to be out. It looked like Burks, even before Burks got the concussion, he was struggling out there, just moving around. You feel bad for Burks because he is so talented. He is big and fast, but he is just not 100%. So Phillips is the guy. I mean, if it's not going to be Hopkins, you feel like the stuff is going to be going to Phillips. Makes a lot of sense.
He weirdly could be their wide receiver 2 this week, and give me at 3,000 with a guy who's kind of willing to chuck it against a matchup that got absolutely thrashed last week. I think I'm willing to do it. And I think he'll be, I don't know, a quarter as popular as Irwin, maybe even less than that. Like
maybe a 10th.
Yeah, it's going to be significantly less. Everybody has that when Higgins sat week 5, Irwin had 10 targets in their write-up. Like every single person has that. We all do the research, and that's one of those ones that everybody has found this week.
Right. Yep. Makes perfect sense.
What do you consider Noah Brown if Robert Woods sits? I mean, I think that Woods would have to sit. You want to get the receiver out of there. Noah Brown was 153 yards last week with Stroud in a game where they're going to have to throw. I think it's fair to say Cincinnati's going to score in this game. Can you go back to Noah Brown at 3,700?
Yeah, I think I could if Woods sat. Just in Bengal stacks, I think it'd be fine for Bengal stacks. Just because, no one would really play Brown given all the 3K options. And so I think it's okay.
And he had 5 targets the week before, too. He was 357 the week before, so it wasn't a 1 week. I mean, obviously the 1 week was huge, but I think so, too. I think if Woods sits, I think there's always this, like, when a guy has a big game like that, it's like, oh, we're never going to play him again. But, like, he's been pretty active the last 3 games he's played, 5, and 6 targets. If Robert Woods sits, I think that I think you got to play Brown with the thought that he's been more active than people think, and nobody wants to go back to him.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And that is sort of a perfect segue into tight end.
Yeah, do it.
I guess I'm sort of starting at the middle, but I'm fine going back to Dalton Schultz. And especially if Woods is out, no one's going to play Dalton Schultz. I've been playing him for a while now. He has 4 touchdowns in his last 5 games, getting a lot of targets. I know I'm jumping around, but starting at the top, like not going to get to Mark Andrews in that spot at 6,900. Probably not going to get to Kittle now with Debo back at.
While you're on Andrews, question in the chat: would you start Andrews or Dalton Kincaid at tight end? Obviously, Kincaid's off our slate, but obviously we follow all the games. If I'm in a season-long league, I don't think I can sit Mark Andrews. Is my answer to that question.
I mean, you're right. You didn't draft Mark Andrews to sit him. I know.
He had 10 targets last week, and that was in a blowout.
Right.
So they were all kind of on the early side of that game. He was super active last week. I'm not playing with 6,900 in DFS, but I'm playing as my tight end in season long. I think that Kincaid is a good matchup, good setup. He's been active, but I'm not sitting Andrews for him.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think you can sit Andrews in that spot.
So sorry, go back to the mid-range there. I think we're going to play Andrews, but you got Laporta, you got Taysom Hill, you got Schultz. I like TJ Hawkinson this week, but what if you don't go Schultz in this range, what else do you go? Because I think the mid-range is a spot to go to.
Yeah, I mean, I think you mentioned the guys. Like I like Hawkinson too. Laporta is interesting. Evan Ingram is interesting at 4,500. He 10 catches on 10 targets for Evan Ingram last time out. I mean, his targets have been so consistent, never less than 7, 8, 8, 8, 7, 7, 10. I mean, like that's pretty good for 4,500.
It's pretty under the radar too. Like I don't think everybody's talking about it. That's a lot. That's a really consistent targets for a tight end.
And sometimes you see Evan Ingram and he looks so good. Back to that like explosive like receiver type player that. He wasn't at the end of his time with the Giants when he was. I feel like you just described
like the last 6 years of Evan Ingram is like those flashes are always there, and you want so much more. But he's really good last year for Jacksonville, and he's active right now. The Niners are pretty good against tight ends; they do play them well. But yeah, I mean, he's a guy that if you're gonna get 7-8 targets, like it's 4,500, like it's gonna work right there.
So, who's your favorite guy in the mid range?
Mine is Hawkinson. Very active last week. The key for me, 38% of the targets once Josh Dobbs came in. So he was like, when Dobbs came in, it was like, all right, I'm going to just look for TJ. I know he didn't. I mean, maybe that was the only name he knew in the offense. I know we talked about he didn't know offensive lineman's name and stuff, and you can't blame him. He got there Wednesday, but I just think Hawkinson in a game where they're probably not going to hit a lot of big plays against the Saints. I always like Jordan Addison, but it's hard to play him with Dobbs, and Dobbs is not super accurate, which helps because I think Hawkinson will get more of the mid-range, shorter stuff, which we could be more accurate on. I just think at 5,000, he's so talented that if you're going to give me 10 to 12 targets, I'm going to kind of just play that every time. He had 12 last week. He was really active. I think he's the guy in this range for me. I wouldn't argue against Dalton Schultz, who just crazy active in the red zone. I think he leads tight ends with team target share and red zone plays. He had 130 yards last week, but in this range, I'm going Schultz or Hawkinson over Schultz, Hawkinson over Jake Ferguson, Hawkinson over Laporta, Hawkinson over Taysom Hill, who friggin' had 2 more touchdowns last week. He had a receiving and a throwing touchdown. Maddeningly frustrating, but Hill's been getting there last week's, but I'm not playing him over Hawkinson. Hawkins is my guy in this mid-range here. Yeah,
okay. That makes a lot of sense. I think you're not going to be alone in that, and that's not
I don't think so
that big of a deal. Seems like Hawkinson will be the second most popular tight end after McBride. I think that's fine. But yeah, like everything you said, it's a great spot for Hawkinson, and especially with Dobbs. That was awesome performance by Dobbs last week.
It was fun.
Not even expecting to play, and then that doesn't even know the names. I mean, come on,
Some of the like stories from that, like O'Connell was like setting up matchups and plays like in the headset in the 15 seconds they have for like the next play. It was the amount of like thinking on the fly between O'Connell and Dobbs last week. Like it's just amazing stuff that like people don't understand how complicated football is anyway. And you throw that in the mix, like the stories are wild.
Yep. So my reason for bringing up Schultz was just because right now I see Hawkinson around 30% and Schultz around like 6 or 7%. So, it's a significant difference.
That's a significant difference with obviously a quarterback in Stroud that is rolling right now.
But I also don't mind eating the chalk if they're going to smash. Like if Hawkinson's going to be the best play at tight end, then I think it's fine to play him. Like Trey McBride even. Like you can play Trey McBride if you think he's going to smash. Just, try not to have the rest of your lineup be too chalky.
And I'm usually more okay going chalk at tight end too. Like I just
definitely
the problem with a lot of these pivots is like they can have 4 points. They can have 6 points. So it's it's not like wide receiver where you can find a guy that really blows up. If you don't play McBride, he's 3,500. I think a lot of people are going to play him with Kyler back. Is there anyone else cheap that you do like?
I don't mind Cade Otton for just, as a leverage play for the same price. Look what he did last week, 6 for 70 and 2 touchdowns. I was sort of worried because they have all their tight ends back now, but it seems like Cade's the guy, and I always thought he was a decent pass catcher. I guess I was just a little worried that he might not be out there as much, but he has been. So yeah, I think Cade's okay. I don't know. I think for larger field tournaments, I guess you could consider one of these Bengals. I mean, Irv Smith finally caught his first touchdown. He's 2,700. Tanner Hudson had 4 catches on 5 targets. But the thing is, so they did okay last week, but now Higgins is out. So, it wouldn't shock you for one of these if one of these Bengals tight ends had 50 yards and a touchdown. I think it's a tough click, though. I don't know. Chigakonkwo. I don't know. Do you like any of these cheap guys?
Not really. If I were going to do it and go probably a pivot away from McBride, I think I'd probably go with Logan Thomas. He's 30. He's 3,800, and a game that we talked about how the fact that Washington throws a lot. I think they're going to have to throw a lot against Seattle. He has, doing the math in my head, 20 targets last 3 weeks, so pretty active and involved. Like, he's not an upside guy. He's not going to have 100 yards, but 45 yards and a touchdown, this price really, really works well, and that'd be great. So I think for me, if I'm going to do it, it's Logan Thomas at 3,800. But I think I'm probably going to just click McBride or get up to Schultz or Hawkinson. But if I'm going to go, I'm running out of money and I want to go somewhere different than McBride. For me, it's Logan Thomas. I wouldn't argue against Cade Otton, but he didn't have 50 yards in the game prior to last week, so that's probably his ceiling game. Although 9 targets matters, and Baker obviously likes him, but I'd probably go Logan Thomas. I'd probably go Cade Otton third in that range.
Fair enough.
Before we get out of here, I find this a really hard defense week. I usually have 2 or 3 I really like, a cheap one and a mid-range one. You mentioned earlier you're thinking about going to the Cowboys. How serious are you about that at 4,400?
Yeah, I'm gonna play some Cowboys. So I'm pretty serious.
That's pretty right. You're a very good DFS player, and that's pretty rare for you. So that says a lot.
I never do that. So a couple things. So Cleveland.
You think Tommy DeVito might not be good?
Well, but I was going to start with Cleveland defense was 4,200 last week, and they were on all the winning lineups. So you can win paying up for defense, and there's value on this slate. If you're going to play a 3K wide receiver, if you're going to play Trey McBride, or there's cheaper running backs. So you have the money. We're not spending up at quarterback on Lamar. There's no Mahomes. There's no Josh Allen. You can get there. And then from a football point of view, I mentioned I'd never seen an 11-point implied total before. We watched a lot of that Giants Raiders game because it was on in the afternoon last week, and man, they're going to have a tough time scoring a touchdown, a tough time. It seems they might need the Cowboys to turn it over, inside their own half or something. So I just think there's upside there for 20 points. Dallas has playmakers, obviously, on defense. They could score a touchdown. So, yes, I am considering it. I also think you could just go all the way down and play the Cardinals for 2,500 against Taylor Heineke. I guess you could play the Jags too, but I think I'd rather just play the home defense against Taylor Heineke. I guess I'm looking all the way up to the Cowboys, or maybe all the way down to the Cardinals. What do you think?
I think the key with your Cowboys point this week for me too is there's not a defense I'd rather play. Usually I'm why am I going to play 4,500 with a team where I can just play this team for 2,700 and be fine? I'm just using a number, and I don't really have that this week. You look at the Chargers, they had 8 sacks last week. They're 2,600, but they're playing Detroit, who's going to run the ball a lot. Goff at home is not going to make a lot of, or Goff they're on the road, but indoors, probably not going to make a mistakes. They're going to run the ball a lot. It's hard to see a lot of action there. The Bengals are mildly interesting to me at 2,800. I know Stroud was really good last week, but still a rookie quarterback. They're 6.5-point favorites. They're at home. You can see some mistakes there. So if I were to go under 3,000, I'd probably go Bengals over Cardinals, although I don't argue with you at 2,500. You just go all the way down and play Tyler, home team is Taylor Heineke. But Cardinals defense isn't good either. It's tough. I'd rather play a good defense, and Cincinnati's coming on pretty well. You go up to Cowboys and Ravens. The mid range is interesting. Is the Niners are interesting at 3,600. Chase Young is going. He's listed as a starter. I mean, you talk about all the horses are there. You got Young and Armstead and Kinlaw and Bose on the line. You got Greenlaw and Warner. Trevor Lawrence is good. Jacksonville's good, but I think the Niners under 4,000 is interesting in a game where no one's going to play them. They're going to be 2-3% owned at the most, because everybody will just bump up to Dallas or the Ravens or even the Saints or Seattle in there. Like, there's just so many people would rather play. The Niners coming off this bye, it's going to be an interesting week. We're either going to see, as I said before, we're either going to see that they're not that good or this defense is going to eat this week. I don't know which is going to be, but I think at 3,600, I think it's a play that nobody's going to have. And if you want to throw them in a tournament lineup, I wouldn't argue against it.
No, yeah, I think that's a good call. I got one like that too that I don't really think many people are going to play. The Browns. Give me Myles Garrett. They're down to 3K, obviously because they're underdogs in a tough matchup, but
they're 3,000. That's a really good price for that defense. Yeah.
That they have Myles Garrett, and Lamar is not
Myles
opposed to turning the ball over.
Myles Garrett's good.
Yeah, Myles Garrett's good, and you're going up against a quarterback that runs and takes chances and could fumble, could throw a pick six. I never mind taking a chance on a defense that talented.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good call. I might, if I get down there, I might switch to that from them to the Bengals. It's a bad matchup as an underdog, but yeah, a defense that can just make plays, and you figure that they made plays against the Niners, who were rolling at that point. The Niners were 5-0 that week, and that they slowed them down. So the defense is really, really good.
Yeah, that was that game with PJ Walker even kept him in that game. That was crazy.
Yeah, so that's a good call. I like that talent at low prices just because a matchup is always an interesting thing on a defense. So yeah, I think I might try and get up to the Cowboys though. I think you made a really compelling argument for just maybe this is a week where you pay up a little bit in a matchup that's so extreme that maybe you find a way to pay up for it.
That's a good word for it. This seems like an extreme spot.
Cool. Anything else on your mind? I feel like we covered this 10-game slate pretty well. There's a lot of interesting little spots here for a limited number of games, but it's actually kind of I find it more interesting and fun than last week. I think there's more there's better games. I know last week you had like the big marquee games, and obviously Philly and Dallas was fun, but the Ravens and Seattle turned out to be a huge bust of a game on the main slate, so that was kind of disappointing there. But I think it's a game slate's got an interesting games. I think Lions, Chargers, Niners, Jaguars are both kind of underrated, really big and fun games for all four of those teams involved.
Yeah, absolutely, much better slate.
And Browns Ravens. Like, I know it's not a great fantasy game, but that's a great football game.
Definitely, yeah, much better slate, more interesting games to watch. Can't wait for that Niners game. I think we covered it. And yeah, I mean, last week I played a bunch of Mac Jones. So, I mean, that tells you a lot about that slate, And
I played a bunch of Bryce Young. So I was right there with you.
Right. So yeah, this one should be more fun.
Yeah, for sure. Want to thank everybody for listening. As always, we really enjoy talking football. Enjoy everybody listening. And thanks for the questions in the chat. If you want to follow Ryan on Twitter, he's at Ryan Belongia, Belongia. I am at Scott Jenstad. Jenstad is Jenstad. We will be back at you. I don't know who will be back at you next week, but somebody will be back at you next week talking DFS next Friday. Again, if you can please rate over the podcast, helps out a lot too. Thanks everybody for listening. Hope you have a really good week 10, and hopefully the Niners wake up a little bit. So I hope everybody enjoys the games, and we'll be back at you next week.
Thanks, Scott. Good luck, everybody.